$4 billion to provide local counties on the border to arrest and charge migrants with border nexus crimes. What this usually comes out to, 90% of the time, is a simple criminal trespass. This is a state charge that is used to add an additional punitive measure to those trying to migrate into the United States. I mean, the worst thing really, if someone is crossing the Rio Bravo or the Rio Grande to get to America, is they're trying to create some generational wealth for their families, or they're fleeing persecution. And the charges really do bear that out. 90%, 70%, upwards of 80% of our charges are criminal trespass charge. This is we defend migrants in this misdemeanor case. That's indicative of a weird fact of our border, that much of our border is private land. So theoretically, if you do cross the river, you're not going to end up in, public space or government-owned land. It'll be someone's private property, which is not normal elsewhere throughout the world. And then another charge that we see often is a human smuggling charge. While that sounds dangerous, and we're taught to look out for, when you hear that smuggling word, you think of the worst case scenario from your favorite thriller movie. What it really does in this context, in the state's context, is criminalize proximity to migrants. So in order to be charged with smuggling, all you have to do is be in a motor vehicle, whether it be a car or a boat, and you have to have someone who is undocumented, who doesn't have papers, and you have to have the intent to be transporting them anywhere, not to smuggle them to commit some other crime, but just that you yourself have the intent to transport them. So theoretically, an Uber driver could be charged with smuggling if they pick up a ride down at the border. I work for the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid organization. We have represented upwards of 3,000 migrants charged in this program in a year and a half. The program itself is responsible for over 9,000 arrests. That's a stunning number. They are often kept, our clients have been kept in these prison facilities that have been converted to hold pre-trial detainees. So just for those who don't know, jail is for those who have not been convicted of a crime. Prison is for those who are convicted. And with the massive influx of arrests, they've been holding our clients in these prisons. Any form of keeping someone in a cage for an indefinite amount of time amounts to some form of torture. But how our clients are kept is particularly harsh. Our clients report of not being able to receive meals regularly. Oftentimes, clients go 14 hours in between meals, 4 a.m. Breakfast followed by an 8 p.m. dinner. Lunch is often skipped. These meals can be quite small. On top of that, they often have mold in them. Frankly, just not edible, not suitable for human consumption. These jails, functionally prisons, also utilize techniques of punishment that you don't often see. We have had a number of our clients kept in solitary confinement for minor offenses, if they even committed offense. I had one client put in solitary confinement for having a medical request, the gall to ask for. I'll answer our questions at the end of my talk. It won't be much longer, but Bob, I do see your question. We'll answer it. And so they're kept in solitary confinement. This one client was kept in solitary confinement for making a medical request. He needed his diabetes medicine. He was a squeaky wheel, and they threw him in a 6x8 cell, let him out 30 minutes every 24 hours. These conditions are quite horrid, and they're meant to be punitive. not just to deter migration, but also to enforce this concept that we called deportability. When you tell the Latino, or Latinx community that your presence in this country is expendable, your presence in this country can be deportable, right? Um, it creates these awful power dynamics that we've seen throughout Texas. So let's say you're a migrant seasonal worker who hasn't been paid on time. Well, if you go to your boss and ask to be paid, he simply can just refer to Operation Lonestar, and you're going to be real quick um, to keep your mouth shut and get back to work. Um, because ultimately, the underlying criminal charges very rarely have outward federal immigration consequences. A criminal trespass charge is not going to affect your change of status. So the idea of inflicting this punishment to affect their federal immigration case if they want to stay in the country doesn't hold water. The pain is the point. The documenting of the pain is the point, and othering is the point. I can talk a little bit more about. I'll mention this point, and then we can get to questions if people have it. The life cycle of an Operation Lonestar case is also pretty, sad, and it's quite telling of what the state's intention is when prosecuting these clients. Up until I believe in the largest county, Kinney County, that has the most current pending charges. Up until I believe February 28th, if a group of migrants was found on private property, they either the cops would be alerted by federal authorities, and there's a lot of collaboration with federal CBP officers, which is quite problematic when you hear, our federally elected officials telling us that they care about y'all's community. When they come across a group of migrants, they actually split them up, male and female. The males are only prosecuted for criminal trespass. The females are then sent to federal immigration custody and processed for deportation. The males go through your typical criminal system in the States. They're magistrated, they're given a bond, and they're put in these post-conviction, now pretrial facilities. They're given a bond that if they're unable to pay, they stay in those jails. And as I just described, they're really horrific conditions. However, once they pay their bond, they're not allowed to stay in the country to fight these charges. They're immediately transferred to federal immigration custody, where they're more often than not deported. So upwards of 80% of our clients are deported after they're given a bond. And then the state makes no effort to bring our clients back into the country so that they can be formally prosecuted. However, the state is ordering our clients back into the country after they've been deported. And so what this does is creates this impossible scenario for our clients. They don't have federal authorization to come into the country. But if they don't, they won't be there when their matter is called in court, and the court can then go forward with a bond forfeiture. It's functionally an extortion racket, where if our clients have had their bonds forfeited because they cannot enter the country, and they lose the thousands of dollars they pay to secure their freedom. It goes through the civil forfeiture proceedings. A judge in Texas has recently ruled that you're not entitled to an attorney in those civil forfeiture proceedings. We're fighting that currently up on appeal, but functionally what that means is you get deported from the country, you get ordered to come back into the country, you can't come into the country, your money gets put in the civil forfeiture proceeding where you won't have an attorney there to represent you. Their bonds will be summarily forfeited, and these families will have lost out on thousands of dollars, which is quite a bit for us, but a massive amount for a poor migrant who decided to flee their home. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $5 a month in Venezuela. Unfortunately, uh, if you want a payday loan in certain Latin American countries, you're going to go towards organized crime. And to pay off these bonds that they'll never get back, some of our clients have been put in an extremely dangerous situation. Um, and the fact that the state doesn't really care about bringing our clients in, trying them, getting a conviction, um, kind of gives up the ballgame what the point of this is. It's political theater where they announce the arrests, they announce the bond forfeitures, and then keep their money. There's no real adjudication of what happened on that private land. There have been instances where our clients have been waved over by cops through an open fence. We have this on body cam. Once they walk through that fence, the fence was shut behind them and they're arrested for trespass. We have instances of our clients who were arrested on a public road and then brought to private land and then arrested. We have instances where our clients were not given notice that they're even on private land. There was no fencing, there was no signage, so they just crossed the river and just started walking. These instances aren't being litigated. There's no individual innocence to be litigated. They've been declared as another and thus prosecuted. Currently in the Texas legislative session, there are a number of really problematic bills that would increase Operation Lonestar funding by another couple $2 billion. They are also creating a new border security deportation force, a state deportation force. And there were talks of increasing the penalty for criminal trespass to upwards of 10 years. So this is getting worse. We are, to be frank, losing. We've had a number of appeals lost. We are pursuing a selective prosecution claim to challenge the policy of separating males and only prosecuting them. But we do feel quite confident in that. But still, they've now started arresting women to rectify that equal protection claim. And they're moving forward with this very dangerous rhetoric that is used to attack this migration invasion, which has been noted by the El Paso shooter who took 21 lives, I believe 4 years ago. The shootings in McAllen recently in a McAllen mall, I believe I have that correct. It might be a different Texas town, I apologize. Where a man with Nazi tattoos shot an Asian family. This rhetoric, when reinforced by formal policies, is quite dangerous. One bill that's also up for discussion is that it would remove civil liability or criminal liability for all civilians that enforce border nexus crimes in Texas, right? Formalizing, a KKK, old style Texas Rangers, militia groups to, round up poor brown folks. There have been reports that since Operation Lonestar's inception, people are getting stopped 5 times as much. There have been 5 times as many classic traffic stops in these border counties. So, everyday folks who just are brown, who have lived in the border, these border communities, are now just getting routinely stopped, being forced to show their papers, their driver's license. So Operation Lonestar, while the very specific program enacted by the governor, is part of this overarching trend and leads to other violations and dangerous rhetoric. I believe that's all I wanted to say about this program. I have questions for for those who have them, I can start with Bob's question. Uh, the state criminal trespass charge only applies to private property. There's another charge that's related. Um, it it's like unauthorized entry if it's a public building, but that often is not what our clients are being charged with due to the nature of the border being mostly private land.
Thank you.
Yeah, Billy. So I had a question. Chris, go ahead.
No, Hyro, you're ready to go, man. You go.
What? So yes, thank you for shedding light and giving us all this information. What policies could we enact? I know you guys are fighting this on the court side, but what policies can the Biden administration do to kind of? It sounds like this is separation of federal and state, but what other things do you think can be done?
Well, the DOJ, there have been a number of complaints brought against the DOJ, brought to the DOJ, kind of elucidating those claims you're saying, right? There's this concept called preemption, where certain fields of governance are preempted by the federal government. It also is true in the state and the local level. So, federal law should preempt state law when it comes to migration enforcement, right? That makes sense. When you cross the border, you're not just entering Texas, you're entering all the United States. So they could challenge this policy, DOJ, and seek an injunction which likely wouldn't last scrutiny in this court. Texas Attorney General has said they've been trying to challenge US v. Arizona, which was a law in 2012 that Arizona passed that preempted, that was found to have been preempted by federal immigration. Anthony Kennedy is no longer on the court. So they could do that, and that injunction would, mitigate pain. Even if they were to lose, thousands of people would not be arrested. They also need to stop cooperating with state officials. I think 40% of our clients, their first contact is with a federal CBP officer who then, reaches out to state law enforcement to enforce the state laws. They also can just, tone down the awful rhetoric that, Kamala Harris has been parroting, that is kind of being reinforced with this new functional asylum ban that they have enacted, which is worse than Stephen Miller's policy. Forcing one of these features is you're forcing a migrant to use a CBP1 app before claiming asylum. So you're asking someone who is fleeing persecution to download an app, request an appointment, and then cross the border. It is so callous of a policy to to inflict on someone. And they also are now enacting a Stephen Miller policy. I mean, these are two federal parties are quite similar when it comes to the treatment of brown folks at the border, at least come election time. And this third country ban would prevent anyone who passes through a third country to be able to claim asylum in the United States. So if you're Guatemalan and let's say you're fleeing indigenous violence that really started after the coup we helped put forth. Um, uh, if you cross through Mexico, you're now completely barred from applying for asylum in the United States. There's no basis for this in international law. There's no requirement in federal law. And it's a deeply cruel punishment given the state of migrants in Mexico right now. Um, there is rampant criminal activity on the southern border. Our clients are routinely targeted for kidnappings and extortion. That these policies, in the same way that the migrant MPP enforce, creates this, leeway, this like dead zone where you can't apply to asylum, you're not going to get processed in time. And so, like, you create these pockets of extremely vulnerable people that the federal government is, uh, promoting and enforcing with these new asylum policies. And it's related to Operation Lonestar because it enforces this idea that um, migrants are lesser than or their claims are illegitimate. And so that's when they're arrested for criminal trespass. No one cares to litigate that actual criminal trespass. What happened when you were found on that property? Those policies, are a, green light to Texas to be like, oh, Democrats have ceded the ground on this issue. We can go forward on this. So, just having more care around our border and migration policies would do a great deal, and then stop directly, cooperating with those officials for Operation Lonestar, at least. I see a hand from Ms. Brooks.
Hold on. Let's go. Chris, go ahead. You had your hand up before, and then we'll go Bob, and then Valerie.
Billy, I appreciate your presentation. I shared with your dad a couple of nights ago that I was very interested in hearing about it, and I thank you for everything you're doing. It's just very disappointing that a lot of people out there are treating a segment of our neighbors and people on this earth with a lack of humanity and respect. But I'm very interested about the part that you talked about posting a bond and then the forfeitures. Here in Virginia law, you can't take someone's bond money without due process of law. And that includes like notification that you're going to do it and then a hearing. Is there any kind of notice being given to people once they've been deported that that's even going to happen?
Yes and no. We've started asking for that notice to be mailed, which, God, like, how effective is that notice? And again, without, an attorney present to litigate that notice, like, functionally, they don't need to provide, right? If there's no attorney present at the civil forfeiture hearing, who cares? These judges are rubber stamping. So there are some instances of one really problematic provision is oftentimes we get assigned a client after they've been deported. We like to meet with our clients immediately, just in case they do pay that bond to get deported, and just kind of explain to them what's going on. A lot of our clients, if we are able to find them, either like we found clients on Facebook, or the jail processing information had a good WhatsApp number. A lot of our clients, when we talk to them, they actually don't understand that they have a pending state charge. There's a lot of miscommunication with the translation. There's a lot of miscommunication with the magistration, because they do oftentimes, especially early on, do these massive magistration, hearings where studies have shown, and it makes sense in common practice, when you're magistrating someone in a group and you ask someone individually then if they understand what's going on, in that public space, people are going to say, oh, yes, of course. They're going to say what the guy behind them said. But then when we talk to them, we learned that they actually didn't know. So they didn't know that they had to contact the county to find a court date. Some terms use, so fianza is the word we use for bond. They use multa, which is a fine that, really kind of conveys the finishing of this, process. So they sometimes do give notice in the forms of, oh, please reach out to the county clerk to find your court date. Whenever we call the county clerk, that line is busy. Again, they're arresting thousands of people. So
that happens in Fairfax too. Sorry.
Yeah. No, so yeah, I've given a long-winded answer, but the ultimate answer is, one, they functionally don't have to give notice if there's no attorney in the proceeding. Two, the notice is often ineffectual because of errors in translation. And one other thing is often the bond paperwork is in English, which is just like, come on, yeah. So they don't understand that, to square that circle. Ms. Brooks, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to know what are the numbers of the people coming in illegally or coming in as migrants, coming across the border that causes such a stir in the news, that causes them to send them up to Washington, because then they come on the backs of DC residents, and DC residents are already going through their changes. And I'm just saying, what are the numbers coming in? Is it any way, what can we do at the border to alleviate the arrest, to help these people, and what can be done maybe to limit the number coming in? I mean, is it any way in that something can be done that they can come in legally? I mean, that's why I'm here tonight, because I have a lot of questions about this. Because my concern is that they are coming in. You know, you hear about the busloads coming in, and there are enough issues in DC as it is without bringing in busloads of migrants. I mean, what can we do? I don't think you need to be locking up everybody. And I'm saying, what can be done to eliminate the problem? What are some of the solutions? I'm hearing the problems, but what things can be done? Policies and programs can be established to eliminate so many arrests and to deal with the issues when they hit the border.
Yeah, so that that is a real concern. I think my big contention would be, the richest country in the history of this world does have the resources, if it chooses to take care of migrants coming at the border and, DC residents, specifically DC residents who have been ignored and, downtrodden due to other sets of government policies. I mean, we are now about to slash social spending due to the artificial debt ceiling limit. So I would say that we do have the resources to welcome folks, to provide resources to folks, provide housing, provide care, so that their immigration claims could be processed. Ultimately, migration is never stopped with deterrence at the end place. Migration is a concept as old as time. And unfortunately, what we have to reckon with is a lot of people in Latin America are fleeing a situation that the United States policy played a role in creating, whether it's the Guatemalan coup in '54, whether it's providing CIA equipment to dictators in Chile and Argentina and Uruguay, who were extremely brutal towards dissidents and caused massive migration in the 70s and 80s. Whether it's, MS-13, one of the first founders of MS-13, I know this is a real problem in Northern Virginia, gang violence, but one of the first founders of MS-13 was someone who was deported from an LA jail, a Los Angeles jail. And instead of rehabilitating folks in our incarceration system, we put them, there's this long storied history of, MS-13 starting in a Los Angeles jail where it was extremely violent. People resorted to crime to get their basic needs met. And then we deported them to their country. And when there was instability, they were able to rise to the ranks and create this criminal enterprise we see now. Most of the cartels buy their weapons from U.S. smugglers, from U.S. manufacturers. We are the ones that consume a lot of the drugs that they used to sell that are used to destabilize that region. So a lot of things can be done, whether it's reparations, whether it's reforming drug laws, whether it's limiting the amount of weapons we create and sell, that can make my clients' home countries more stable. Because ultimately, when you have this instability in their country of origin, they're going to flee. They have to. There is no real option. You just assume, when I'm talking to my clients, they just assume that the other side is better because their current home is untenable. So those are some long-term solutions, right? Repairing some of the harm we have committed throughout history, and then also reinforcing those, home countries and democracies. One thing is that we are currently, inflicting sanctions on Venezuela. That's limiting their, economy to prosper and, uh, um, you know, has enforced some forms of austerity on them. Now, we can disagree with the Venezuelan government, but I mean, even if you look at the Russian sanctions, there are tons of studies that show overarching sanctions on a place really just exacerbates the living conditions of the poor and doesn't have that psychology we wanted to change the leadership at the top. So rolling back sanctions on Venezuela so that they can, sell more oil and thus, my clients who live there have a better prospect to live and take care of their family. I do, and as we welcome in migrants, like many of us will have to make some certain sacrifices if we, want to reform our country, especially economically, to, provide the fulsome resources. There's no getting around that. I think people on the left need to acknowledge that, like, if we were to, open borders and welcome everyone who wanted to welcome, like it would have caused some, real harm on working people. Like they'd have to sacrifice a bit for, before we can, really revamp and provide all the full resources we need to take care of these folks. Did I answer your question, Ms. Brooks? I know it was quite long and generic. Yeah, we can't be afraid of hard work if we want to treat people right. And I don't mean to diminish, the concerns of, buses of people who need resources into your city, right? Someone's going to take care of them, and a lot of that's going to fall on community members as opposed to the government who won't. I think it is worthwhile whether you view it from, a fairness point where, our country, not us, did inflict a lot of this harm. And then also just from, a care point where our clients are really just trying to exist and they can't exist in their homes at this point.
Okay, thank you. You helped.
Okay. I can answer Bob's questions. So yeah, they are, in violation of their own smuggling laws, but they also are the enforcer of their own smuggling laws. There's some litigation, I think, out of Martha's Vineyard, which is like kind of warped. I hope they're good at their job. But they are bringing some claims against Florida and Texas for and encouraging folks. Pretty much a lot of these migrants were lured onto these buses under false pretenses. And there's a civil forfeiture suit. I don't know enough about that, so if the follow-up is on that, I can't help you. But if you have another question, I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you very much, Billy. I had another question if no one else wants to fill the void. I thought the right to redress was addressed when we were dealing with Guantanamo detainees. I thought that was I won't say settled because there's nothing settled with this court, but I thought there were steps taken there that gave people the right to due process.
So there's a number of things there, right? Well, first it is state law, right? So we are bringing a number of pretrial writs of habeas corpus claims on behalf of our clients, number of due process claims under state law. Obviously, if we have a federal flavor to that, we then can eventually make it to federal court. But the problem here is if a state criminal defendant wants to seek federal relief, their state case has to be completed. It's called what's the word for it? It's not.
Catch-22.
Yeah, well, especially for our clients who, these cases aren't getting litigated because they've been deported and they're not getting facilitated back in the country. Is that abstention doctrine? Younger abstention. Um, so yes, so that is the big problem with asserting federal claims. They're going to be interpreted by state judges, and state law is much more malleable, uh, even more malleable than our current federal laws with this court. Ira, you have another question? Or
Yeah. With going back to something that Valerie mentioned, with the migrants that are getting bused to random cities, what kind of effect is that having on the work you're doing? Because from what I'm hearing is some of the people on those buses are actually supposed to be in certain courts or certain places, and that's messing them up even more so.
So that's messing up their federal immigration claim. I don't have any clients who have been bused. Some of them might actually would love to be bused. Get to a place elsewhere. But the idea is that the concept you're talking about is that when you do start a federal immigration claim, you need to file for leave to, either have that claim transferred or you can get a temporary travel permit to leave and then come back. And so many migrants, because there's no right to counsel in a federal immigration claim as well. So again, all this legalese is so confusing. Mistranslations we've talked about occur in the federal immigration court context as well. So oftentimes clients are put in a really bad position with their immigration case when they're bussed away from the jurisdiction that they're in without knowing the legal consequences from that. I mean, that could be an automatic bar to pursuing your claim, which could have obviously disastrous effects. But I can't really speak too much to that because it has not happened to my clients.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone have any other questions? Well, we have Billy available.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something. This is Andy. I'm chair of Providence District Committee, and the one thing that kind of shocks me about this is Billy's statement that Customs Border Patrol, which is under the control of the Biden administration, is actively participating in this deterrence through torture program of Governor Abbott. And that's just unacceptable. That's completely unacceptable. And we need to let our elected officials know that. We need to talk to when you see Jerry and Don and Senator McCain, we need to let them know, and you need to send them emails that it's really, really wrong that these people are being detained by federal authorities. They could just deport them and they wouldn't have to go to jail. They wouldn't have to go have their bond stolen. But our government is making a choice to put people into this torture system. The Biden administration is making a choice to put people into this torture system. And that's unacceptable. That's just wrong. And we should speak about this.
And there have been many conversations with federal officials. They know about this problem. They've been unable to get a hold of it. The federal immigration enforcement is defined by sectors, and so the Val Verde sector is a notoriously harmful sector, and the Biden administration knows this. They cannot plead innocence. There have been formal DOJ complaints filed. And it would again, our estimates around 40% of our clients. We represent 3,000, 4,000 clients. That's 1,200 people that did not need to go through the explicit pain that they have gone through. And listen, let's be frank. It is a choice, and it's a choice during an election. It would be a political fight. Fox News would go rampant with it. But you have to make choices, and you have to, there are choices to be made, and there's ways we can choose to lead. And again, our clients are, at worst, just I could work on something more. Dad, can you share my email with Bob? I don't know if or I could put it in the chat. Um, really, I'm I'm of the left of the left. Ultimately, I do my work because I believe that we should live in a world with open borders. I believe freedom of movement is a human right. And ultimately, what the worst things that my clients are really trying to do is to get generational wealth for their families, right? My clients aren't crossing the border. There are literally zero drug smuggling charges, right? Because when you think about it, right, these drug smuggling rings are $1 billion business. They're not making money sending individuals across a river. Most of the drugs collected and smuggled through our country come through ports of entry, come through legal processes, often through American citizens. So ultimately, the crime my clients are committing, right, leaving footprints on this massive ranch, um, is to simply just give themselves a better life. And that's not to mention all the clients who, have a legal right to claim asylum in our country under international and federal law because they fear persecution or they have been persecuted. Um, so the answer can be more money. More immigration judges are needed. I would also ask for a federal right to counsel in immigration proceedings. Unfortunately, immigration judges have been known to be quite cruel. Um, they're overworked. It doesn't, enable you to really engage your empathy sensors. And then another thing that we haven't reformed our, visa structure in 20 plus years. So right now, if you are a Mexican on the waiting list to get a work visa, the waiting list is upwards of 20 years. And so when people ask my clients, when people ask migrants to do it the right way, it is functionally impossible. There is no way to legally migrate to our country if you are a poor person. Um, and people, one, in my opinion, have a right to migrate, and people need to migrate. I have clients who have sick family members, and they said, quite frankly, I'm not going to let my daughter die. I'm going to go work in this field that will hire me, to be clear, right? Thousands of US companies utilize my clients, utilize migrants for their cheap labor. And while it is still cheap relative to us, it's a massive amount of money to them. Operation Lonestar is not concerned with prosecuting big businesses utilizing, undocumented labor. So congressional action to reform our visa system would be helpful. More immigration judges would be helpful. Eliminating the CBP-1 app requirement and the third country asylum system would alleviate a ton of harm. One thing I mentioned is that our clients, we've had dozens and dozens of clients kidnapped after they've been deported. One thing our government can do to alleviate pain is not release people through deportation in certain northern states of Guajira and Tamaulipas, and Matamoros. When our clients are left there, they're left with this red bag on the international bridge at regular intervals. Organized crime regularly kidnaps them and then extorts their families for more money. Our government can fly our clients to Mexico City and deport them from there, and they'd be infinitely safer. So that's one thing that you could do to eliminate harm. Any other questions y'all got for me?
Hey, Billy, real quick, for some of the people that joined in late, can you go over the name of your organization and your formal title, just so everyone that didn't hear it at the beginning knows?
Yes, of course. So I'm a staff attorney for the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid's Operation Lonestar Defense Team. I joined about 2 months after the program started in December of 2021. So we're coming up on 2 years of this program, while there has been a Democrat in charge of the federal government. And it's caused a lot of pain. Any other questions? I put my email. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So currently I am actually working out of Mexico City. I do the special litigation and appeals. So I rarely have to come into physical court. I am out of the Brownsville office in the Rio Grande Valley, where we have Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid is the largest public defender organization in the state. They also have the civil arm, so there are 14 offices. I go to various offices for various things, but currently I am in Mexico.
Billy, so after the meeting, we'll talk. I'll get all your contact information, your website, your email. That way we can share it with everyone post meeting. Does anyone have any other questions? If not,
yes, Jairo, it's me, Maritza.
okay,
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is a very interesting conversation, but just a question popped in my mind. Out of all the groups of people that come to the border, do you have a lot of people from Mexico, or is just more like a Central and South countries?
Most of my clients are Mexican. I don't have the exact number, but I would imagine upwards of 60%. But a lot of our clients are from Venezuela, Nicaragua, Guatemala. We had a run of Cuban migrants at one point, and some from Haiti, quite a bit from Haiti, actually. And it's just a function of where they're migrating from. So.
Yeah, I was surprised when I heard that a lot of people from Haiti were coming, because it's kind of a long way, just, well, or maybe an easy way to go to Mexico to just do the crossing. But
yes.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I'm from Mexico, and every time I go visit, I see Haitians in the corner of the streets, trying to clean the windshield and just trying to see if there's an opportunity, something that I never, see before. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, so there's quite an interesting dynamic going on with us and Mexico's current relation when it comes to migrant policies. Just quickly, I know we're running late, but right now, under the Biden administration, we're allowed to deport people not from Mexico to Mexico. So AMLO, the president of Mexico, has agreed to a cap of number of Venezuelans each day. Again, that exacerbates that vulnerable situation that leads to a lot of kidnappings when you deport someone not from a country into that country with very little to no resources. And it's just a cost-saving measure by the richest country in the history of the world. We also pay for a lot of the federal immigration enforcement in Mexico. La Guardia Nacional is paid for 100% by Congress. And they commit untold human rights violations, as are instructed by us, to prevent migrants from ever reaching the northern border or our southern border. So the tragedy in Juarez recently, where I think 37 migrants died in a fire in a jail, that facility was paid for and was guarded by people on America's dime. And the idea is to prevent that migration from reaching our border. So there's a whole wealth of ways it's called extraditing our border, where the Biden administration is, what I want to give the exact name. So there's Biden administration just floated this idea to send troops to the Darien Gap, which is in between Colombia and Panama, which is a very dangerous jungle that many people migrating from South America use to get to safety. And one reason why they use this dangerous jungle is because if they go through normal towns, normal roadways, they'll be targeted because of their vulnerable status. Organized crime or government officials will target them and extort them. So they use the Darien Gap quite a bit. We're thinking of sending soldiers there, you know, uh, right? People with guns. That kind of tells us how we view the problem and how we view those migrants. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope that Mexico treats you good. Thank you
It
for
does.
everything you do.
It very much has. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you guys for the time. I'm always happy to talk about, my clients who are really wonderful folks, just trying to, do right by their family and do right by themselves. So if you have any other, if you need anything, I can pass my information along and we can talk.
Hey, Billy, I think I speak for everyone when I say that this has been a real eye-opener. In some capacity, I think a lot of us understand what's going on, but to have you come on here and really take a deep dive in and share the facts, the cold hard facts, and we need to keep our elected officials honest. And so I can't wait to share, some of the bullet points that you're going to give for us, because those are really good talking points. But thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on here. I know you're busy. But thank you so much.
And the last thing I'd say, I'm no electoral genius, but like treating people kindly can be a winning issue. Treating people with humanity. Oftentimes these folks are just political theater come election time, to hear Biden talk about the family separation policy and how evil and cruel that was, but then to turn around and invoke literally the exact same policies that Stephen Miller produced is really heart-wrenching. And so I would just, remind our elected officials of that, treating people kindly, telling the stories of these people can win. And you know what? If it loses, then fuck it. Sorry. Then I just don't know what to say. There are certain issues where we shouldn't compromise on, and treating people with humanity shouldn't be one of them. Thank you guys so much for the time. It really was an honor.
Well said. Thank you, Billy. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, guys. All right. I'm going to get back to work, but I'll see you guys.
Take care. Do your thing.
Bye.
Bye. All right.
Wow.
So what do you guys think?
That was
a lot of
amazing.
bad information. It's kind of, I'm processing it all in, and I'm saying, what if it's hell down there and it's not any better up here, or maybe it is. I don't know. And certainly there are things to write our elected officials to say, address these things. I think that's important, and at least to put it out there that, hey, we're aware, and I think make others aware of what life is like. Also, right. Billy's comment about treating people with kindness and dignity. There, by the grace of God, go many of us, Yeah.
By the way, folks, don't assume that any elected official understands what's really going on. When Maritza first got involved with Don Beyer, we sat down with him in one meeting, and she explained how many years and how many tens of thousands of dollars it took us to get her citizenship. He had no idea. And, everybody says, well, why can't they all come legally? Family of four, looking at $30,000 to $40,000 to be able to come legally. And that's if they can get through the red tape.
Yeah.
So why can't they all come legally? Then we were getting her sister's visas to come up and visit us. And he had no idea. He thought that the visa system, the requirements to come from Mexico, are identical to those coming from Europe, where he had worked in Switzerland. They're entirely different. Entirely different. You can't be a renter in Mexico and get a visa to come to the United States. You have to own property. How about that? Don Beyer had no clue about any of that until we sat and talked with him. So you can't assume that our elected officials, unless they're on some kind of subcommittee working on the problem, have any idea whatsoever what the requirements actually are.
Because they're different for every country.
Yeah. But my nephew's ex-wife was from Colombia, The rest of her, they fled. And the rest of her family pretty much, or most of her family moved to Canada because it was a much easier process. It only took 3 years. Whereas here in the United States, you can count on 10 years, and don't forget they're going to lose your paperwork. And you'll have to.
Benita's sister-in-law went to Germany and became a German citizen and then immigrated here.
They came without any problem. They didn't have to have a visa to come. So sometimes money is everything. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Jairo. That was tough to hear, actually.
It was
A
great meeting.
So
Yeah, no, I'm glad you guys took so much out of it, and I really took the accountability part, that we need to keep our government officials accountable. You know, we love these guys. You know, I've met Jerry Connolly, Don Byer. They're great guys, but like how Gil said, they don't know the issues, and hearing it from him, the inhumanity is going on down there. It's a lose-lose situation for them, and it's making everything down at the border or legislative processes go a lot slower. So I can't wait for him to send me some of that information. I'll be sharing it with all of you, and I'll follow up with everyone.
good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Excellent.
I'll if you guys are okay, I'll go ahead and wrap up the meeting.
Mhm.
All right. So I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting for tonight. Thank you guys all for showing up and asking your questions. I appreciate it.
Great
Thank you.
meeting, Jairo. Thank you so much, Jairo. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you guys. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
You
Have a
too.
wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
Feliz cumpleaños!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, para Maritza.
Feliz cumpleaños, Maritza.
Very soon.
Feliz.
Very soon.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good meeting. Good meeting.